Hello, and welcome to our roundtable discussion on how edge cases and data will enable autonomous transportation in cities across the United States. I'm Chris Barker, founder for CBC, a global transportation, technology, and smart city-focused consulting firm. And our focus is on design and deployment of new mobility services. And this morning, I'm joined by two industry colleagues, Radha Basu, who is the founder and CEO of iMerit, a global data annotation services company delivering high-quality data that powers machine learning and artificial intelligence applications for Fortune 500 companies. iMerit has a workforce of more than 4,000 people worldwide who provide end-to-end data labeling solutions and expertise to solve the most complex data scenarios for autonomy across air, land, and sea. Radha has led iMerit through two funding rounds, raising $23 million to date from investors, and continues to grow the company to new revenue heights. Welcome, Radha.
Hey, good to be here, Chris.
And also we're joined by Michael Sherwood. Michael is the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for the City of Las Vegas. Michael and his team were the first city in North America to deploy an autonomous shuttle service on open roads in a downtown corridor. Michael has more than 20 years of experience in the fields of process improvement, technology, and innovation. Most recently, he served as the Deputy Director of Public Safety, Business Services, and City Technology for the City of Irvine, California. Michael is extremely passionate about technology and believes through innovation, workforce development, and collaboration, we can create brighter and sustainable communities. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's great to have you. So I think we'll start, Michael, with you. Nevada and the city of Las Vegas have been arguably some of the most progressive areas of the United States when it comes to enabling autonomous mobility, new mobility services. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, can you describe a little bit about how your state and your market has approached and enabled successful deployment of everything from autonomous semi-trucks to vehicles, to autonomous shuttles, and even drone applications. And a little bit more specifically, what were the policies and procedures from your team that's made a lot of this possible?
Well, we've come a long way, Chris, in what we've been doing. Obviously, Nevada as a state, Southern Nevada, the region Las Vegas is in, has always been a pioneer in innovation and technology. You can see that's kind of in our DNA as a state. But obviously, as I've discussed, the city of Las Vegas had the first shuttle in mixed flow traffic. Over 40,000 people shuttled on that autonomous vehicle. Again, we just right before the pandemic had 75 BMWs that were autonomously driving the strip up and down through a partnership with Aptiv, as well as Hyundai, or with BMW, excuse me. And we've done that. Everybody's heard of the Boring Company, just opened up this week. It's been running successfully, shuttling passengers around between our convention center. That's underground. So we've really been a leader in different types of multimodal transportation. A lot of people forget already, it's not that long ago, we still have Hyperloop being tested out here, which is an above ground version of a mass transit system. And that's still successfully moving through trials. But overall, it's Nevada's strength as a state and Southern Nevada as a region to adopt new technologies, to work on being the first to write the policies, write the procedures, develop the guidelines of how transportation will be not just adopted here, but adopted across from a national level as well as a global level. And we learn a lot. When you are launching and testing these technologies, you learn a lot about how you need to future plan your infrastructure, how you need to future plan communications with your constituents and your community. Testing these technologies is one thing, but getting the communication out to the community, getting the community to understand the benefits, you need that wide adoption. And that's really what makes us kind of special, is the fact that we have a community that is so used to. Where else in the world do you go where, a building maybe 15 years is blown up and a new building is built in its place, bigger and better than before? Not many places have that kind of charisma and and entrepreneurial, can-do attitude that we do have here in Las Vegas, which makes it a great place for business, let alone testing great new innovative technologies.
And are there any particular policies that you feel have been more successful in proliferating these types of services across the region?
Our state government has done an excellent job, as well as on the municipal level as well. But it's really been those larger. So in the very beginning of autonomy, we were one of the first states to have actually laws and policies put into place to allow autonomous vehicles to be on the road. Mm-hmm. Very important. And I think, Chris, you mentioned it earlier, drones. We were federally designated by the federal government to be in a drone testing area. We also have 2 drone test fields where actively companies are working on testing. The city itself is working on a project to bring more autonomous vehicles, including a drone program, forward. So a lot of the legislation, again, I don't want to narrow out any one singular piece of legislation because they're all progressing things forward. But it's that attitude of, let's get some legislation out there, let's learn from it, and then we can go back and tighten it up if we need to, or broaden it if we need to. But it's getting the companies the ability to have some kind of way of operating, and it allows us to learn so we can write better laws into the future or create better policy decisions going forward. But I think, to just sum it up quickly, is Nevada's been a leader in creating policies and regulations around new technology, cutting edge technology. And that's why we're so happy. I mean, just the last one, Elon Musk, to have the Boring Company tunnel here, one of the first cities in the world to have that technology built out. Where else are you going to see that done? Where else were the laws and the way the government works with private sector, where else could that be done in the time frame it was done? There's only one place, and that's right here.
And speaking of the private sector, Radha, I want to get your thoughts. I know you and your team at iMerit are really focused on the data analysis that makes autonomous and new mobility services possible. And as Michael's talked about all these different things that are going on in Las Vegas, different types of mobility services, all of these different modes of transport are generating millions upon millions of lines of code and data. And question for you, as you look at from your side, how are we as an industry equipped to kind of capture and process and analyze this data as we look at expanding these different mobility services across cities like Las Vegas and other markets? Can you give some thoughts and perspective on what you're seeing?
Yeah, so, we started iMerit about 8 years ago to create livelihoods, jobs in the data economy. And at that time, it was so much of it, and even 5 years ago, was about the data science. I really feel good about the bet we made that this will be a long-lasting career opportunity for young people, requiring, as we go, more and more special expertise and skill. Well, let me tell you, even we could not have anticipated the amazing ride our autonomous technology, autonomous vehicle customers have taken us on. We've been very lucky to have this ringside seat, a window into all the innovation via the data, which is now proving to be the major factor as AI goes into production. Data, and the quality of the data, the edge cases, being able to deal with that in a really proactive and very responsive way is turning out to be a major factor in the evolution. So the next generation of robotic mobility, and we say robotic mobility because that is aerial robots, ground robots, in the future even home robots, which will improve general quality of life, which we'll talk about later, has a lot of innovation and radical digital transformation going on. And as Michael said, consumer acceptance, navigating regulatory stuff, safety requirements. And the companies, our clients, have invested a lot in capturing a lot of image data, video data, LiDAR data, now text, speech to text. And as they scale, it's becoming increasingly complex and nuanced and high quality. onboarding each new city will have new situations and challenges. And what becomes really important, which is sort of why we got into this topic here, the edge cases in the new areas will define the last mile success of deployments. An edge case is an unusual or exceptional situation, but they could be caused by road conditions, construction zones, all kinds of things. And we'll go into some of this later, but that is where this breed of people, iMeriters, are often called by our clients as edge casers. In fact, some of the people have on their LinkedIn, I'm an edge caser, because it is that nuanced human technology interaction and the knowledge that has come from many years of being on the ring side and being able to do the annotations of the data that bring the best information and action into that situation of the nuancing of the edge cases. So it makes it possible, working with Michael in terms of what are the next public works things happening, automatically feeding that in to being able to do a live remap and being able to help our clients then get them into those cities, as an example, are some of the things that we're very focused on and feel very, very fortunate to have been in this situation to be able to offer that kind of skills and expertise.
Hey, Radha, I'm glad you bring up the comment about scaling, because this is a question also for you, Michael. When we look at what you've accomplished in your city and other cities are looking at bringing new mobility services, they're starting as smaller pilot projects and ideally looking to ramp to bigger size deployments. And scaling is the big question. What do we need to get to that point? And how does the data that Radha is describing and the data that you're managing at the city level, how do those two pieces come together for us to get to that scaling that everybody in the industry is trying to accomplish? And
you bring up great points. I mean, look, everything we've done, even here and throughout most areas, is small pilot projects, learning the technology. It's not about the technology. It's really more about the transfer of information from city vertical systems to the private sector or to some of these other companies. And how do we provide that flow of information? I think, Radha, really the point is, let's look at how many accidents we haven't had with all these autonomous systems. Why is that? It's because you've taken the biggest factor in accidents, which is the human driver, out, and you're using data. And that data is critical. So going forward, we talked about it a little bit. We already brought it up a little bit in the conversation. But how, when we're doing road work, do we get that data out quicker to the consumer market so that data can be adjusted by these autonomous systems and then accommodations be made for that? How can we get more real-time traffic flow data out of our vertical data centers and onto a horizontal plane where more people kind of have access to the information? Information and data say it can save lives. Information and data can also power technology. So it's really how are we doing now? We're working on those types of scenarios now. So we have some intelligent roadway projects underway currently where we're actually linking our controllers so that we can broadcast that information. In the last 3 or 4 years, DSRC, an older technology that's kind of, not here to start a debate today, but it's kind of slowly fading away in favor of 5G. But there was that capability, and it's existed for many years now, to send signalized traffic data when the lights are going to change from red to green and green to red to a vehicle in a safe and secure manner. That technology exists today. It just hasn't been widely adopted by the automakers. You see a lot more of that adoption now in some of these newer upstart companies, and I will not call Tesla an upstart company, but you'll see it in the newer types of vehicles that are coming out, more of an integrated link with technology. And you've seen the big automakers now following suit with more technology. And all of that is capturing more data. The biggest challenges are, how do we all share data for the common good? That's going to be a challenge. And so, we'll see how that plays out. I know government is working on it. Scaling it is not going to be, once we have a it's really, we're lacking a foundation, a framework. Once there's a national framework and foundation and a way to share this information more openly and securely, you'll see more of an adoption of this technology. But you're in the infancy stages right now, and we're already seeing some good collaboration and scale coming up. As scale rises, costs will come down, and that will provide even more opportunity for data sharing. I think the biggest challenge right now, and I'll let my colleague make sure she'll set me straight here, but I think the biggest challenge is, how do we get some of these companies that have data that could be used by lots of companies to share that information? Well, government will openly share its data sets. How do we get some of the auto manufacturers that are driving the streets and collecting data on bad roads, and they might have that information locked into their data system, but they are unwilling to share it because they feel it takes a competitive advantage away from them if they openly share it with other automakers? So I do think the challenge is going to be not collecting the data. It's going to be, how do we ensure privacy, and how do we anonymize it and share it openly to build the best technology system versus a bunch of individualized system, a Ford system, a GM system, Tesla. How do we make it an open communications platform?
And to that point, Radha, how do you feel from your side, or where are we at as an industry in being able to not only collect the data, but be able to analyze it and come up with the insights that are going to impact how mobility in cities ultimately function and operate? What's your assessment of where we are and kind of where we need to get to?
So I think that this is slowly evolving. And I could tell you that one of the key things that's resulted is the understanding. First, you have to understand, you have to have a shared understanding that human in the loop, data annotation, human in the loop, that means experts with the technology, is the inevitable path to achieving full autonomy, because in many of the things that Michael's bringing up, the humans can decipher some of these very complex, rapidly changing on-road scenarios. If you take, for example, some of the China's smart roads approach, where road structures themselves provide signals. So you can have smart road construction barricades that signal their presence. This data can come in and help with change management and exception flagging, and tell us where to focus our efforts for temporary road edge cases. I would say, this will probably get Michael excited, there is no city like Las Vegas. It's the ultimate edge case. It's such a unique city. And I love this interaction and working with Michael, because a city like Las Vegas can bring AV to a medical district, a sports and entertainment center, a resort corridor, whatever is needed. And the way that pedestrian congestion, many times first-time tourists, all of these things, signage, as he said, every year, some new construction's coming up. And we need to be able to have data points capturing multiple times of day, mapping traffic patterns, seasonality, timing of events. And we will have to look at co-creating value from all of this data instead of a short-term approach. And I fully agree with Michael that making that available, we put together something called the edge case modules. It sounds very simple, but it's technology that's able to actually aggregate across this and really get into an ecosystem of data sharing, and doing this and balancing this with security and privacy. And this data being seen more as a public good to really make autonomous mobility, whether it's ground, aerial, even going into the home, that kind of mobility is really possible. And those scenarios are different. They're different from Boston or Seattle. And it's in that case, that way of looking at edge case scenarios and being able to have the expertise to aggregate across those and have the exceptions across those. That is the way I think, and doing it in real time, working with the cities, getting there, as I said earlier, public work stuff, new construction stuff, getting that data into the systems so we can be proactive about it. I think that is what will make autonomous mobility really scale.
I want to remind our audience that if you have questions, please feel free to post those into the chat window, and we'll be making time to address those questions in the back half of our session. Meanwhile, Michael, going back to what Radha was saying, when you look at the autonomous shuttle deployments that you did in the downtown corridor and some of these other projects that are underway, can you talk about kind of the data learnings of, if you decide to suddenly create a construction zone in an autonomous area, how the dialogue is happening between your public works department and your team and the companies that are operating these autonomous systems, so that there's an ability to plan and react to these scenarios, or positively react to these scenarios. Can you describe how that process is playing out and how that can help inform other cities that are dealing with similar dynamic situations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a constant learning experience. I don't think anybody there's no magic bullet right now, or no magic way of making these communications happen. Look, anytime you have innovation, you have change. Change is hard for society as a whole. And so remember, in a lot of systems in most municipal governments still are manually driven, manual processes. They're not even put into some kind of computerized system. So the conversation started just at the very basic level. And as we advance our technology, it's more about now, how do we create these data sets and getting people to understand what a data set is, why it's necessary. And so it is a challenge to have those conversations internally, especially when you're going to departments that have relied on a manual process. Switching to automation is one, costly for some of these departments, two, necessary at some point in the juncture. But then it's having all this data, and what do you do with this data? How long do you keep the data? There's a lot of policy decisions that have to, and things that need to be addressed. How long are you going to keep cone data? Do you need to keep it historically? Do you not need to keep that data? If you're going to do, other types of roadway work, what does that mean? As far as that you need to provide a longer lead time, a shorter lead time? What about emergencies? What about a traffic signal being out? How are you going to handle that data and get that out to people that are ingesting the data? So there's a lot of these issues that are still, it's a work in progress. There's no, even here, and as much work as we have done, and this whole region of Southern Nevada has done a fabulous job with modernizing their technology and collaborating. We're very lucky we have a lot of regional boards where it's not controlled by one government city entity. They're regional, which makes sharing of information really phenomenally easy. But it's still a matter of building the policies and procedures, Chris, as you brought up in the very beginning. We talk about state level policies and procedures. Now you got to bring it down to the micro level where it really matters, which is the street level. And creating those takes time. It's not something that you create in 3 months, 6 months. It's an ongoing process that really will become never ending as we continue to move. And as we continue to modernize our traffic signal system from an analog system more to digital. And that's a whole nother area. And then obviously the wrapper that goes all around this, which I cannot help but to say is, and it's on the minds of everybody, I'm sure that's on this seminar right now, you have security. Security will be a huge factor, not just the privacy of the data, but the security of it, and what could happen if these systems are disrupted or interrupted. That's a focal point that we have to be concerned about. But right now, I think the biggest thing is just the education that we're going through. Seminars like this, working with different layers of government, because it's a whole new way of capturing this information, and it'll be a whole new way of sharing it.
And Radha, you mentioned the edge cases. So examples like public works projects where a road may be being redesigned, a stop sign might be put in a traffic cone, all sorts of unique scenarios that are real in the dynamic nature of a city. I'd love to get your thoughts first on how are you and your team identifying these edge cases, figuring out how to analyze the data and provide the results back to folks like Michael. And then conversely, Michael, how when you look to expand new mobility services into different parts of your city, how you're considering these different unique dynamics. So there's a collaborative discussion happening between you and the private sector. I'll start with Radha.
So I will first start by agreeing with Michael in really agreeing that we are in the very early stages of this. There is much work to be done to get. I mean, we are. You would say, if you're in a software cycle, you would say we are in pre-production, just going into production. We have more than, as you said, 4,000 of the annotation experts. And we see a skill ladder from a simple object, banning boxes, to video tracking, to complex LiDAR, multi-sensor data, to mapping. Let's not think of these as casual part-time occupations. I believe that AV, AT, autonomous technology, autonomous mobility, data specialists will become as vital as air traffic controllers or driving instructors, just in a different context. What does that mean? That you will have to look at the data at every step of the way and be able to do continuous learning and development, continuous training, continuous evolution with the new kinds of data we're getting. And not think of this transactionally. Here's a transaction coming in. In fact, even today, as the vehicles are going into launch mode, not even into full production and deployment, people are asking us to look at, and we're looking at it with consistency, nuance, insight, quality over a period of time, quality of a workflow, quality of a parcel, quality of a particular type of deployment, quality of a particular technology. Being able to put all of this together and aggregate it in particular areas and scenarios in a city becomes very critical. And I was talking about the edge case modules. We have other technologies called ground control. It is about bringing and aggregating all of this data and being able to share that with our clients who are the AV, the ATAM developers of the products, and working with the cities themselves to make this data available in a very nuanced way. So it's not a miraculous, here's the miracle, throw this out, this will convert it, automate it, it will be there. And I think people like Michael understand this better than anybody else, that even this work will not end with deployment of AV vehicles. You will need audit, you will need post-analysis. A person who does this work for 3 to 5 years becomes a domain expert. And our whole focus is on developing this cadre of humans who are in the loop of the technology, the evolving technology, who become these instructors, air traffic controllers, kinds of people who have the expertise to do that, and having the technology to support them, to support the AV players, and to support the cities, the actual users of this, like Michael.
And Michael, the data sets that Radha describes, if you have that level of detail and information, how does that unlock your ability to bring new mobility services to new parts of your city? So I know you're
Chris, it's like finding gold, Chris. It's like finding if you have the ability to unlock the data, you have found whatever high value, whatever you want to call it, oil, gold, platinum, you have found the chest of wealth for the future. I mean, look, data is the key to all of this. Having the data is one thing. Now you have to refine it and get it into usable formats. Because the applications, we've really stuck just with mobility, but the applications are much broader. And that data can be used for business, for economic development purposes. It can be used in so many different ways to do other components within an organization. So it's really, it's the hard part right now is getting the data to where you can start refining it and then telling stories with the data or information that you have. And now, what we're seeing now is data overload. Now we have edge networking and edge communication. So all new data flows coming in. So the challenge is really going to be, working with the private sector to help government, manage all these data flows, and what are the most important data flows? How do we use those to help manage traffic and new mobility services? But how do we use that data in other ways to help our small businesses, to help business in general, to help our pedestrians stay safe, to help our community grow and prosper? So you really, once you find this treasure chest of information, now the hard work comes into play. Finding it was hard, but now how do you use this information that you have, and how do you use it in the best way possible? And it's not just usable. Let me just give you a quick scenario. Wouldn't it be great to know if you're having a concert downtown, or if you have businesses that want to know when's the best time for me? Maybe I should move my dinner hour, from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, because during 7 o'clock it's a lot of traffic and my customers might have trouble getting to the restaurant. So maybe they adjust their pricing. So there's all these new things you can start thinking about from an innovative perspective. Demand pricing for restaurants. If they had real-time traffic flow, maybe there's a way they could adjust pricing. Maybe they adjust deliveries and charge. There's all types of things that you can start doing with this, either to help the community, help businesses, or what we all want is a better life for the community, the residents that live within the boundaries of what these systems do. But having the data is great. We have lots of data. It's now, how do you get the right partners to help you refine it and make sense of it, which is going to be the challenge.
Could I add something, Chris, to just this topic? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think one thing that is with all the clients that we work with, and the AV clients, one of the important things that's coming out is the safety consciousness and the partner friendliness of these AV clients. In fact, in speaking to one of the CTOs, I asked the question, what is your number one priority? He talked about at length about the safety consciousness, and their number one KPI is safety. And I think that focus then leads to a way and an approach, and I'm now talking about the AV players who are our clients, that then leads to a number of steps, both in being proactive, but also building in flexibility in the mobility that allows these things to happen. So I just want to make sure that because Michael's, as he should be, focusing on that, is so it becomes a three-way thing. It becomes between the city and the AV players and data services companies or solutions companies like us, because we have to really iterate across all of these three players in terms of making the safety happen, which for each one of us, the KPI, number one KPI is the safety.
Michael, thoughts on that regarding the safety component as you're reinforcing public sentiments for a lot of these?
Well, we've highlighted that. I mean, look, the number one reason these technologies are here is for safety. We've all heard of zero fatality type, propositions. Anybody who's lost to a traffic accident or a pedestrian fatality is unacceptable. With all the technology and systems we have, everybody who works on these systems, it's all around safety. It's about moving the needle forward and creating even safer environments. And that's what the data provides. The data provides a lot of that information to the manufacturers and to regulators and municipal government. I think a lot of people probably out there are wondering, do we get to see the data if the human safety driver takes over during an event? How is that data disseminated and shared? It really depends on the event and different operations. But I can tell you that in a lot of the cases where we've run autonomous vehicle programs, yes, that data is provided to us. So we can see, depending on what the issue is, it could have been a faulty traffic light. data compatibility issue from sending data from an intersection to a vehicle. So a lot of that information is shared. We call that edge data, where we're able to analyze that and make better decisions. That's, again, why you collect the data, is so that you can go back and analyze it and try to predict future outcomes, try to make safer roadways, and try to develop just safer policies in general. Because look, if people don't have trust and confidence in a system, whether it be a vehicle, an elevator, whatever it might be, people won't use it. So safety, is definitely the number one priority. Radha's got it, nailed it, that there is no bigger priority than safety around the individual who's using this technology. So
to that point, if you're bringing new mobility services to a medical district or a sports complex, what's the operational and the safety data and all the kind of things that Radha's described from edge case elements that have to be considered to make those types of deployments possible? And Michael, what are your thoughts initially, and then Radha from your side on how you can support something of that nature?
So we're working on actually a medical district in our downtown area where we're putting together a autonomous vehicle. I'll call it a shuttle service for a descriptive term. Look, we plan out where the stops are going to be based on how, again, data. Where are the stops going to be located? Well, we're going to locate them based on data where people need, where they conjugate from. If they come out of the hospital and need to go to an x-ray down the street, we're going to put the stop in the safest area next to the hospital that we can. And we're going to analyze all the different data that's available to find the best location for that. We're going to look at traffic on the roadways, number of vehicles, times of day, so we know what this autonomous vehicle can expect. That there's a lot that goes into planning this. You don't just get up and start, saying, oh, the vehicle will stop here, without having the data and without having your use case fully laid out. What is the use case for this medical district system or loop? And you need to know that. Who are the customers going to be? That might decide what mobility technology you use. Do you need to have accommodations for ADA, and how many instances that you think that you will need? That will tell you how many vehicles may need special outfitting to be able to handle the customer load. So there's a lot of data and analytics and planning, less on the technology side, less in my realm, more in the land planning and the roadway design. It's all those engineers and people like Radha that analyze and design and look at all the data. My job's the fun and easy part. I just get to play with the technology and see it operate. Make sure that the proper antenna systems and data collection is there. The real hard work is the design and engineering before you launch.
And Radha, from your team's perspective, how do you enable a deployment like what Michael just described? I mean, what would be your kind of thought process and approach and recommendations for something like that?
I think first point I would make is that you have to look at this a bit, and I would say not a bit, but holistically, in that we talk about autonomous vehicles more as in ground robots. But if you really look at some of the players, I happen to speak to a CEO of one of the autonomous technology companies, and he talked about the fact that the AV industry has to aggregate data between ground, aerial, and also be able to supply it to like a home robot into the human being, right? So it is aggregating across all of this, whether it's and capturing data and being able to respond very quickly multiple times a day, mapping traffic patterns, things like that. Even visual data, traffic data, and even accident analysis. In fact, I would put that pretty high there. Accident analysis helps our clients. I want to be clear that we are a facilitator. Helps AV companies capture more edge cases. So the planning part for the city And the edge case, it comes back to the edge casers that can help the AV companies, the AM companies. And being able to actually co-create the value from all of this data is going to become very important. I will reemphasize another point that Michael made earlier, and I reiterated, which is about this data being shared as more and of a public good. So that becomes important if we want to really deliver on the true smart city kinds of thinking that is being built into cities right now. And there's been a lot of discussion about an autonomous transportation. Will it take drivers out of the driving process? Roles of humans in delivering, high quality data for broader autonomous mobility. And at least I believe in this so passionately, that human in the loop is going to be super critical for that autonomous mobility to have the best impact on cities. And I think I would sort of end with that on that note, and our ability to skill people on an ongoing basis to be able to address that is a very important thing. But looking at it across data from ground, aerial, and at the consumer level as well.
Rod, I'm glad you bring up the human involvement, because it's a question I had for both you and for Michael. As we move to this autonomous future in mobility and other things, what kind of new workforce opportunities do you see from the private sector side? And Michael, what do you see from the municipal side of how this is going to create a whole new generation of opportunity, workforce enablement activities, and things of that nature?
It's going to be, look, you're creating a whole new industry from the ground up, and so there's going to be a lot of new jobs, but there's also going to be focus on present workforce. People are forgetting that we're going to need more GIS and mapping people than ever before. People forget that's a skill we've had for years, but now it's going to need to be even the standards and the specs that it's going to need to follow. We're going to need more people to do GIS and our mapping, take our roadways and digitize them. So that's going to go. You're going to have a lot from the planning side. You're also going to need to look at we're becoming a more digitized society. So understanding how all the intersections are all going to be packed full of technology. It won't be just IT departments anymore. Public works individuals and traffic engineers are going to need to understand not only the core job they understand today, but they're going to need to understand how the technology plays a role in that. But it's from the governmental side, there's a huge, I think Radha said it really well. Human labor is going to shift into new realms, but the human is still extremely important in this whole entire scenario. There is no autonomy without the programming, without the mapping, without the data collection, without the IT systems. None of that works without the security. All of that is human based. You may take the driver one day out of the vehicle, but the human that's operating and still using the service, there's still a lot of opportunity there for workforce development and growth and programming, huge. And then not even mentioning the private sector yet and all their opportunities. So, most people should be thinking about this as, where do I need to be in the next 3 to 5 years? What skill sets do I need? How do I get engaged with my government? How do I get engaged with my educational institutions? Where do I need to be in that to reach those new goals or to reach that new job opportunity? Because they are going to be there. They're there now, and we're moving faster into that direction. And those that have the skills or are building the skills today will have the skills for the future.
And Radha, your thoughts from your current workforce and your future workforce, where do you see this opportunity?
So one thing I would say is, in the COVID year, in this last year, we created over 1,100 jobs. And a lot of it wasn't around autonomous mobility, autonomous vehicles, drones, etc. And Michael's point about GIS. we're hiring several hundred GIS people. So it's about what are the new jobs, the new roles, and how can we get to, we're doing a lot of validation, mapping, auditing. These are all new roles. And the entire way about aggregating across not just cars, but across trucks, drones, robotics, and viewing all of this as different forms of AI, whether it's looking at a drone 3D point cloud-based technologies that address drone mobility and the information you get from drones, or being able to aggregate across this so that we really see this as creating a lot of jobs and, very importantly, taking current jobs and being able to skill them into the types of things we would need as autonomous mobility goes into production. I still think we are in the very early stages. Those insights, those audits, that post-analysis, becoming a domain expert. And maybe, there will be in the future domain experts that are regional or across different industries, sports events. How do you design mobility services across major sports events? That could be a domain expertise because we can aggregate across multiple types of applications that we've done. Mm-hmm. So all of these come together, I think, as each city, as we look at each city and say, how does autonomous mobility, how do we work with the city and the AV players to increase the safety, accessibility, and efficiencies? How do we look at the rollout, whether it's event-based, whether it's, medical area we talked about, or sports or entertainment, or a city like New York that has so much pedestrian traffic and so much traffic on the roads. That's very different than having a Washington, D.C. that's full of, these circles that we go through, some of the most complex things that we've worked on. There's complexity in Washington, D.C. for many things, but this is just one of them. Yes, but this just happens to me from the GIS point of view. So those are the kinds of things that we would look at, and we are looking at, actually.
Perfect. We have a few minutes for some audience questions. I'm going to try to get through as many of these as I can. So a question that just came in. As vehicles drive on the roads, interpreting everything in the surrounding area and logging this information, do you envision this creating a data marketplace or data economy?
Come on, Chris, that's an easy one. Of course. Data is we've talked about it, it's a treasure chest, it's a trove. Now, how does it work? A lot of questions in that from a government perspective. I'll let Radha handle hers. Do we charge for that data? Do we give it away? I think, if you're asking a personal opinion here, we work for the people. So government should be providing that information out there. Now, the private market could take our data with other data from like their vehicles and other things, and then package that. And most likely the private sector will sell that information and data. Mm-hmm. But huge opportunity, a whole new economy basically around data is already there today. It'll just expand and be more. And let me give you a thought to think about. Things that we're thinking about is we have a lot of vehicles that drive the streets every day for municipal purposes, to pick up trash or do whatever. What if you outfitted all those vehicles with sensors and collected information on potholes and fixed assets that might be missing? Exactly. There's a wealth of data that the city could just use on its own without marketing it or selling it or giving it out to help its own interests. But imagine now that data, having a car with sensors. If you're a UPS or FedEx and you're driving almost every street, or an Amazon delivery, what could you do? Who would want that data, and how much would they be willing to pay for it? And I can tell you there's a lot of companies out there that would love to have pinpointed data and information from a trusted source like an Amazon, a FedEx, and UPS. And I can share with this audience, they're working on that now. Don't kid yourself that those ideas and opportunities aren't out there. And the opportunity for a whole new digital economy to form around data, and just specifically roadway data, huge.
Radha, your thoughts?
I actually see mobility as a solution. You know, we always are in the technology world, all the SaaS stuff, right? Where incumbents, disruptors, innovators, cities, we develop platform-based mobility services, and customers can tap into them. I mean, just think about, we can crowdsource, except we used to do crowdsourcing or we still do, about potholes and, you know, just putting that into a marketplace. Well, think about that. Think about these sensors and the crowdsourcing from them and being able to provide that to customers in looking at the public good, the equality of access, the inclusion. You know, in many ways, people trust technology when they see a human brain beside it. And I think this what we are talking about is, the question is a great question, by the way, and looking at how you provide this as a marketplace. And I think of, you know, all these sensors and crowdsourcing the data and saying, and aggregating across it, crunching across and saying, okay, driver, autonomous vehicle, you're approaching a series of 3 potholes, and, you know, and you're going to go do this. So work around it or take a different path. Those kinds of things will make mobility as being able to offer autonomous mobility as a solution, you know, like a SaaS solution.
We are running up to the end of our time. I do have one last question I'm going to try to squeeze in for both of you. And I'll start with you, Radha. Help me finish this sentence. In 2035, data will have enabled autonomous mobility to do what?
In 2035.
2035.
Yeah, in 2035, data will have enabled autonomous mobility in the true sense of mobility, not just vehicles, but ground, air, ground robots, aerial robots, home robots, etc., to increase safety, accessibility, and efficiencies in cities by a factor of multiples. No use of fossil fuels to transport people or things, not getting lost in route, learning from accidents, greener world with less vehicles. Do you even need a car? And, you know, like the Japanese invented just-in-time manufacturing, I think we will have a just-in-time autonomous mobility services that will dramatically change our society from what it is today. But it is about increasing safety, accessibility, and efficiencies.
Very good. Michael, do you have a thought on this as well?
I'd say be in Las Vegas in 2035. That's what I would tell you to do. You're going to see the best technology right here. So don't forget about 2035 is happening here today. So
That's
I would
right.
say, you know, it's going to be a brighter future, more sustainable, safety, everything Radha said. She did a great job in nailing down the major points.
And Michael has invited me to come and do the rides in Las Vegas, which we'll be doing, of course, to gather data, to be able to look at all the edge cases and provide that to you. So thank you, Michael.
All of you are welcome. Radha and all the listeners are welcome. Las Vegas is open, and we are excited to be back and have all of you come down and try out all the different types of transportation options and that we have here in our beautiful city.
We're on our way after all the travel suppression. It's time to get back on the road. Well, thank you both. It's been a great discussion. Very much appreciate your time. Thank you to TechCrunch. This concludes our panel session for today. And any follow-up questions you may have, please feel free to address this on the portal, on the TechCrunch portal. And otherwise, have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Chris. And anybody have questions, shoot it out to us. We're happy to respond. And great being on the panel with you, Michael. Really, really enjoyed it.
It's my pleasure.